Hello, black pupils. I'm going to teach you about American history using the hyper-evidential. I am not a lawyer and I am not a licensed journalist, but we have these black pupils' whites of eyes and the only increasing value of that in demonstration of the same thing. In other words, we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, where communications about difference means to observe the nature of difference is being projected by the identity of nature itself, and no one could make that up. And or nor how the other species bodies have two eyes, for example. Quality aspects in nature is distinct, but also non-distinct. So, excuse me, we have the hyper-evidential that we could use, so to refer to it this way. And we know that we could discern through history all sides of criminal and civil cases, and lawyers, and the courts themselves, and the prisons. They could be and were a part of a torture, extortion, slavery method that was three ways manifest. And greater than that, and more finite than that, was roles with a identity theft, fraud, slander method, /S, that no one wanted and no one wants increasingly. All exceptions in exception nature were propagated, self-cultivated by a breaching method that came from before modern religious messengers were born. And in the sciences and uses of the sciences' names and everyone's name had already become criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. More and more, that was used remotely by an additional name, /S, from everyone else's. To begin to discern this, we have to begin to discern perfectly, and at all, at least. In other words, the human fact cheating nature breaching method that our founders actually communicated for us to understand. No one had free speech. Even when they had group free speech, they had to pretend, they had to hide their actual motivations for it. Because James Madison and his plan forced roles. That's why and how they left slavery entrenched. They had to lie about themselves. Everyone had to collude against themselves, including Native Americans against Native Americans, or be sensed. This breaching method calls that out. And it showed alter roles. Everything it does, it maintains blame on other things, others ourselves, or it senses through our own now. Because while those roles were being sensed and maintained, like with economies, demonstrably our founders told us not to entertain the economy's narratives and natures, leaving out exception nature, or the difference. In other words, that's why no one's allowed to that's what, in other words, the differences between countries that fight with each other. They have collusions with all kinds of natures of organized crime, with databases and with difference /S. So on Fox Connecticut News and next to them, increasingly are people involved with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with a whole bunch of different countries, and with Trinity College and a whole bunch of different countries. They had roles with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, not just with the World Trade Center attack, but with this breaching method that has replaced what our founders communicated. George Washington had to come to Wethersfield, Connecticut to counter-extort, to force roles with James Madison's plan and the founders behind him. In other words, and slavery was left entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. Sickly distinctly, too, because it used functionally and uses functionally how sickly non-distinctly is self-valued being and having been left out. While we have readings of the sciences and convictions by them with syntax nature that can't afford what is actually being projected by nature itself to each age of fact-cheating nature. Little kids could discern that there was a breaching method, a predicate acts of facts, torture, extortion, slavery method upon Native Americans sustained until Native Americans against Native Americans, we're fighting with each other how to react. In other words, and syntactically, even when they don't want to fight with each other, we're in systems now, A through Z, tactical ulterior, from the one that is also positive unto itself. And it has an only increasing appreciation of exceptions, the exception nature, the way it uses it further hyper additionally from our own. And while as simultaneously appreciation of a special difference as a guide. But again, now a special difference comes through systems tactical ulterior doesn't work that way. Because nature itself shows us there are 5 distinct identities of hyper invisible but still discernible. And that is one of the ways it is grouped. It is also grouped 3 ways. And that's how we can discern the identity of all space/existence. The same way little cells of a little part of your body have a semi-nature relationship to your complete identity. And everyone's complete identity has a semi-nature relationship that has to that identity of hyper simultaneous. That identity as the identity of space/existence. That is greater than it and more finite with it. And as its identity of relationship to itself, making more of itself. From as with and for that. As it's discernible from our perspective, and as it was actually discerned by the ancients before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to defend themselves as fact treatment nature wrongly, and to defend that, not realizing a breaching method, realize it can do that, and then get them to defend simultaneously more and more the value of the science's names abridged and used abridged and haven't been, or roles with blaming, keeping other things, others, yourselves, blamed for nature's demonstrations of the breaching method. For example, with tactically denatured suburbs before America's founders were born, it's an identity of relationship to the Earth's identity of relationship to itself. That is causing negative value nature progressions, acts in nature. Like, for example, hardly any worms at all now walk into bodies of water, which is why they have no fish in them. One of the reasons they have no fish in them anymore. And they used to walk into puddles. The whole soil nature is changing. And the worms used to feed the fish when the raindrops are on the pond. There's no bugs landing on it, and the bugs are less present for the birds in the rain. They're hiding from the rain, or if they're not hiding from it, the worms come out. See, nature's trying to show everything is its own body, but we're not paying attention. Because you guys are not following mandated law, and you guys use your titles you guys are because this is simultaneously tied to every nature and every science. And what nature itself is showing us, it just happens to be exactly what James Madison was trying to communicate to us, and with our founders behind him. But he and them still don't have free speech. All truths are used for lies. And we have self-valued roles with sciences that already communicated other for them, and they got paid to do so. See, it's important. All aspects and natures of roles with the economy are also with live progressions from those locations, and the difference between that or the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, criminal insidiousness, is the 3 branches of government, the exceptions tied to that, because everyone has to fake exceptions. Increasingly, as the breaching method knew it would. Everyone has to be in self-value, having been. Quality aspects and fact treatment nature, fact treatments and fact treatment nature styles that can't afford that, can't afford to defend that and afford to be what is actually hyper-evidentially capable of being discerned. and convictions by that with words. They can't afford any algorithm from off the campuses, from off the internet companies' locations. FBI has roles with New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, with the Facebook page of Hartford Hospital, with the Facebook page of Wethersfield Police, with the Facebook page of the FBI, with the Facebook page of the Marines. Involved also with news, planting evidences with names next to their locations. See, there are types of jobs, but they all connect with that theater, where if you have black pupils, whites of eyes, and you can see that, then you can see that, in other words, others communicated about how the breaching method put that in place, put other to be communicated with this, than what nature communicates with it. Again, right where and how nature is projecting to us how it is difference / hyper difference. Again, there are those 3 parts of time bound. That extent we know was true always in the past. That extent we know now is active, and to an extent, a whole bunch of different things that we know are true always grouped is the second. And then the third is like the value of the seasons that are not here, but they are already a value here. To an extent, we know this. See, these 3 parts of times are grouped, for example. Also, the difference between how it is grouped 5 ways, like, for example, an identity of time before this that we know we don't know about. It's also grouped active ways we don't know about, tied to the one we know. And in the future, there's also another one. I mean, in other words, there's that extent we know about, like the seasons, as value here now already. But there's that extent to the future that we don't know about, but we know that too. This is where physics, metaphysics, and identity juxtapose. Now one has rows, sub rows. So there are wire crime acts and methods like hear no evil, see no evil, for example, with the people who answer the phones at locations. And they keep doing stories and going by issues. Now, good people were maintained evil, blaming other things other than themselves for it. And as roles were all good, in other words, because the breaching method needed positives and negatives to hide behind. So only allowed people involved with identities of value progression as relativity to positive and negative simultaneously as criminal insidious natures of positives and negatives, and names uses, and nature uses to keep other names / s left out, like the breaching method. It's a scientific value demonstrated to us by nature itself being one of the things that is true always that slavery was about. A human fact should be nature breaching method. Nature, I'm not even a lawyer. The name of the predicate discerns the identity of a main verb, invisible but still discernible. The identity of a predicate act discerns a criminal insidiousness nature of identity, one influenced by, in other words. See, but the standing expert on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, Robert Luskin, he has a co-defendant named Thaddeus Grabowski, who's involved with people associated with my algebra teacher in high school years ago, involved with also Mike DeMaine and Adam DeMaine. I never met Adam DeMaine. And their family and neighbors. I never met their family and neighbors. I have roles my algebra teacher, also with their religion, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and their roles with the security of the schools and other agencies, and predicate acts before and after that of other people connected. And then they make it look like people were peers, etc. This is a method against every single person, strictly distinctly, because it's also relative to where nature also asks us a question, to ask questions to ourselves and others, like how and why could have stayed left out all this time. These these things that are inseparable from these critical subjects, like how nature itself has the colors white and black as what has us looking as the same exact non we have the same color eyes. While there are exceptions. See, nature itself answers our questions and shows us revelations and answers. See, but with this breaching method employed, a whole bunch of natures of people, industries, things, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and responses to all kinds of negative value nature progressions acts. Nature is more and more only capable of being at locations A through Z, at countries A through Z. If there are exceptions from countries, it has rolled itself by with the uses of those exceptions, tactical ulterior from how nature uses exceptions. Increasingly, though, as styles, needs, and nature is increasingly dependent upon the past, also forced to fake exceptions and keep everyone, while in the course of keeping other things, others ourselves, blamed for those things, like, again, like the breaching method that is demonstrated to us by nature itself. For example, too, as why and how they were distinct possessions of different countries. The northern colonies of America and the southern colonies. And they had slavery distinctly, but also non-distinctly. And we're that we have that obfuscated because the North had a pretended liberty side with freedom that it didn't really have. Both the North and the South were charged with getting free, and whoever was going to win that war, rhetorically, etc., that was part controlled by the breaching method that still did design the nature of the suburbs, knowing the nature of the cities would unfold, only capable of being that, only capable of being sensed through trying to do damage control with that. It's this breaching method senses through our own at countries A through Z. And it showed other people how it could do that. And then it showed them how they have to hide how they did that. It has complete remote possessions of all identities of sophistication. Black people, most of the human species body we know, they have means to transverse the earth and put all this effort into building weapons, but they don't have that. But they self-value cover-ups of World Trade Center predicate acts, things that cover-ups of how our identity is used remotely, pretended only for personal motivation. In other words, but really because they were used remotely since they were kids. And that's, in other words, where people are roles communicating other than what our founders communicated to communicate about that breaching method. They're pretending this thing is debatable, or we had debates with the people that we don't even know years later because their positions are locked now. Then they can't, then they lose their money. This, in other words, we have to address the economy all kinds of ways. You have people pretend they could speak for the law. They were already roles and predicate acts with facts. I'm not even a lawyer. Black pupils. We want a quality of fact-driven nature they can't afford to have discerned. All sides of criminal and civil cases, the difference between that. Because the difference, everything's about this difference / hyper difference. A former director of the FBI is one of the ones recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with criminally foreign influence uses and changing my communications on off Central Connecticut State University with people, male and female, associated with the intelligence community, foreign and domestic, where they're involved with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, also with the religious spots, and also with delusion since founding. black pupils. You all kinds of delusions and differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, with the identities of the law associated with mental health and reason and logic, all kinds of organized crime stacking and cover-ups, because they are being used, haven't been used remotely too. Cover-up stacking fake conversations with people into databases. A whole bunch of people tied to a Leahy family and people with the name Lombardo involved with all kinds of natures of federal crimes, organized crimes, with retired police chiefs on my street and people that plant evidences from other areas, involved with retired police chiefs and their families and intimate ties. In other words, it's not personal against the Mazzucatos eat too. They pretend that they try to make a fake exception of knowing me, and they have roles with people on all kinds, like a bunch of probate courts. See, probate courts are involved with medicines and their reactions with medicines at elderly homes, veteran homes, campuses, prisons. The Sandy Hook has a prison involved with foreign and domestic together, all kinds of natures of organized crime with psychiatry. They have roles of crimes and criminals before they were caught at their crime scenes, and with other natures of organized crime at the same time, and then trying to cover it up. And then pretend they're trying to just do it as corrections, torturing the principal child abuser, while they were way worse. Has a whole bunch of people tied to a Dean Judd, involved with the border countries, and their own against their own, and Cubans against their own with psychiatry. See how they brought the torture to Cuba? They got people using words like radical and extremism simultaneously, criminally foreign influence, fact, truth, nature, quality, aspects, nature, information, influences, and tactically delusions raw. So they switch names and forge names as courts. And then, in other words, so they won't even legitimately identify themselves. They put fake, they confess fake, falsified police reports, switching officers' names, roles with ones that weren't even there and stuff like that, with no and charges with no writing. And then they put all those different narratives into the databases. Who knows what's there? Since I was a kid, they've been doing it with ties intercities with this. Then they put everyone next to everyone in fake conversations. They're going to keep want to go on with their life. In other words, just like me. But the difference is I'm not going to ignore. You're not going to plant everyone role self-value with fake law names. I want them identified, please. Judge Napolitano, I don't know if Foxct can. I don't know if the Wethersfield Police Facebook page too. There's a Joshua Julian, a Joshua Stryker, and Joshua Schumack, and the mother of a Joshua Schumack is involved with foreign and domestic intelligence, with some KKK black themed and Latino themed, involved also with religious nutbags, with the sexual and medical and overt criminal enterprises, same ones, not legitimately with their unmarked police forms and pretending to be against or before the police or against. It's either one or the. There are collusion with all sides of cases every day, all kinds of natures of federal evidences, crime, rackets, methods, federal rules of evidences, methods, and delusions relative. So Connecticut has been refusing to identify themselves, and way worse with everyone connected to them, private and other, even their family members, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since, has something to do with their roles. So with the same names involved with the predicate acts confessions over the phone with the Wethersfield Police regarding the names Sullivan and Colello. So there's a Daryl Sullivan involved with also a Maggie with name switching and forging, and switching and people forging too with the intelligence community associated with Alina's Pizza and a Daryl Sullivan, and people with the name Maggie, and there's men and women that use the name Bobby, They have state police, men and women, sickly, distinctly, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, certain type of victim / hyper victim. Fox News has a recent report of a stabbing of a state police officer. It is recorded that they can't afford the quality of fact-keeping nature to defend their own regarding that relative to their roles with the organized crime. Joshua Julian is one of the ones with the Whiting forensics involved with state police interstates and with Whiting forensics with the Connecticut State Police, he's involved with predicate acts on my street with people with the name Cololo and Mendez involved and Yagman involved further with sexual and medical offenders of kids with foreign and domestic medical families, forging conversations, fake conversations, and police reports with kids and with adults, and through time too. They put me in fake conversations with the police when I was a kid. The kids they did communicate with both had collusions with overt criminal enterprise, private one. In other words, and federal evidence is crimes with all sides of criminal and civil cases and people associated with depositions. Also, the deposition of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, involved with courts and their family members that were plaintiff. And then they requested they said, oh, well, if you need to have it, to host it here. Because they wanted it made it look like it just wanted to get involved because it's a former director of the FBI as a defendant and his co-defendants. But they were planting evidences at West Hartford locations that were also collusions and confirmations of confessions that a Joe DeMoro, a Ray Cololo, and a Mark Violet made regarding their families' roles with the intelligence communities and foreign criminal foreign influences there. And for example, relative to the black KKK theme, and before I knew they were connected as a confirmation, a Mark Violet and a Justin Kovickis recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed they have roles with a Timothy O'Brien and a Ray Cololo, planting evidence, recording people and criminally foreign influence, fake conversations and recording people with the police. And they have wire crime acts and methods where they fake and change what's actually recorded at police stations. So the police can't be trusted and the FBI can't be trusted because they're involved with the digital crimes and more upskirt pictures on Twitter still with the people involved with the Facebook page of the principal child offender and with a Joshua Julian further. And I still haven't been responded to regarding his confessions. All kind of messages on my machine too. And they hid that. And they put fake and changed communications with me and the people involved. It's important that you get them onto campuses. Also, Whiting Forensics confessed the name. Excuse me. All right, thank you.